When it comes to UFOs, most of us tend to think of modern stories involving radar systems, fighter jets, and grainy footage in the night sky. But what about the incidents that happened even before the term unidentified flying object ever existed? From an egg-shaped object that fell near the site of the first nuclear test in New Mexico to a strange being quietly buried in a Texas cemetery, these events were once forgotten or completely denied by the government until they were brought together in today's video. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. On August 16, 1945, exactly 1 month after the Trinity atomic bomb test shook the skies over the New Mexico desert, two boys, Jose Padilla, 9 years old, and Remigio Baca, 7 years old, were riding horses across the vast land of the Padilla family ranch near the town of San Antonio. They were looking for a lost cow, an ordinary task in the daily life of post-war southwestern ranchers. But that morning, a loud explosion echoed from afar, shaking the ground beneath them as if an earthquake had struck. Thinking it was a mine blast or military test, the two boys quickly urged their horses toward the direction of the sound, but what they saw left them stunned. A long trench stretched across the dry, dusty land, as if something had scraped violently along the surface. At the end of the trench was a round metallic object, so large it made the boys stop in awe. Its shiny surface sparkled in the sunlight, and debris was scattered all around. One part of the side had been torn open, revealing an empty space inside. According to Jose and Remigio, they saw something moving inside the dark interior of the round object. Looking closely, they realized it was a group of small beings, no more than 4 feet tall, with thin legs, large heads, and extremely fast movements. At such a young age, with a life experience limited to the farm, the boys had no words to accurately describe what they saw. They quickly rode home to tell Jose's father, but he not only dismissed their account, he also assumed it was just another weapons test, something no longer unfamiliar in this region since Trinity was conducted. However, just a few hours later, the area where the explosion occurred was blocked off by the military. A convoy of trucks arrived, and soldiers in uniform with no insignia began silently clearing the site. According to Jose, he and Remigio secretly returned to the site at night. They found a leftover piece of metal, an oddly elastic panel. When bent, it quickly snapped back to its original shape, as if it were a futuristic material with shape memory. They brought it home and hid it beneath the floorboards for decades. The object was later tested in 2015 and identified as a common aluminum alloy, but that didn't explain why such a material had the strange properties the boys described. The story of Jose and Remigio wasn't made public immediately. In fact, it wasn't until 2003 that the two finally recounted the entire event to Jacques Vallée, a veteran UFO investigator who had worked with the US government. And although the two boys were the only ones who directly described the living beings inside the round object, they were not the only witnesses to events believed to be related to a UFO. More than a decade before the Trinity explosion shook the New Mexico desert, a strange flying object fell from the sky in northern Italy. This may have been the first recorded UFO crash in modern history. The origins of the story trace back to a figure well known in the field of UFO research, Roberto Pinotti, an Italian historian specializing in aviation and unexplained phenomena. Over the years, he has gathered and published a number of documents believed to be classified, related to the crash of an unidentified object near a small town called Mellini, not far from the city of Milan. According to the documents published by Pinotti, in June of 1933, an unidentified metallic object crashed near the town. The authorities at the time quickly sealed off the area. 2 telegrams were said to have been sent that same day, one ordering absolute silence regarding the landing of an unknown object on national territory, and another demanding the immediate arrest and severe punishment of any journalist reporting on the incident. Because no physical evidence was documented, Many have questioned the authenticity of the events. According to Pinotti, the incident was handed over to a secret unit formed by the fascist government, known as Gabinetto RS/33, which was said to be responsible for the study and collection of phenomena related to unidentified flying objects. The head of this unit was none other than the renowned inventor Guglielmo Marconi, a Nobel laureate with close ties to Italy's leadership at the time. If true, this information would not only suggest the existence of an early organization dedicated to UFO research, but also imply that non-Earth technology may have fallen into the hands of major world powers even before the start of World War II. The story was echoed by a man living in northern Italy, recounting a tale passed down through 3 generations of his family. According to his great-grandfather, who had served as mayor of a town near Malini for over 3 decades, a wingless metal aircraft crashed in the hills in 1933. He remembered it clearly because secret police had arrived in the middle of the night to seal off the area and ordered everyone to remain silent. The story took an even stranger turn when David Grush, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer and now a prominent whistleblower in U.S. congressional hearings on UFOs, stated that a high-ranking military source had confirmed to him that the object which crashed in Italy in 1933 had been recovered by the United States after Allied forces occupied Rome at the end of the war. If that is true, then the object is no longer in Italian hands but has instead become part of the U.S. military's classified archives. And much of the documentation related to it is believed to have been stored in the Vatican. No physical evidence has ever been publicly released, nor has there been any official acknowledgement from the Holy See. But with every layer of information that comes to light, the question is no longer whether something fell in Malini, but rather, why was the story kept secret for so long? In the summer of 1945, while America was still basking in the glow of victory after World War II, certain military outposts in New Mexico remained on high alert. Nuclear testing continued under strict secrecy, and in that environment, even the smallest technical failure could carry unimaginable risks. One such incident occurred in mid-August, and it brought with it the quiet appearance of a man known to few outside the military, Lieutenant Colonel William Brodie. Brodie was piloting a routine training flight to Alamogordo Air Base when he received orders to divert and investigate a communication station that had suddenly gone dark. The station was part of an internal communication network, and its abrupt loss of signal raised suspicions among commanders that a technical failure, or something more serious, might have occurred. According to accounts recorded decades later by investigator Jacques Vallée, Brodie discovered the cause when he landed near the transmitter site. It wasn't an electrical malfunction, nor was it sabotage. Instead, resting silently in the dust beneath the signal tower was a metallic, egg-shaped object, approximately 10 meters long, as if it had just fallen from the sky. What caught his attention wasn't just the unusual shape of the object, it was the clear sign that it had directly collided with the communications tower, snapping part of the structure upon impact. The surface of the object bore no identification numbers, no insignias, and no aerodynamic features that resembled any aircraft of the time. Near the object, Brodie also spotted 2 boys on horseback, the same Jose Padilla and Remigio Baca mentioned earlier. He didn't approach them. Instead, he observed from a distance, then immediately returned to base to file his report. Although there is no record that he ever made the incident public, those close to Brodie would later confirm that he spoke about the event in detail within his family circle. However, in all of the official reports declassified in the years that followed, specifically those related to the Trinity events, there is no document noting the presence of a strange object at the scene, nor is there any record of Lieutenant Colonel Brodie operating in the area near San Antonio during that time, even though his family insists he often referred to an unusual mission he had undertaken just after the first atomic test. His story, much like the account told by the 2 young cowboys, was never committed to paper, only passed on by those who remembered hearing it. But when multiple fragments all begin pointing to the same location, within the same window of time, and all describing an object that defies explanation, the coincidence becomes something harder to ignore. It becomes something we begin to wonder about. When people think of major UFO crash stories in history, They often think of Roswell in 1947, but there is another account, one that surfaced at a time when the concept of a flying craft was still far beyond the reach of science. The event took place in a small town in North Texas called Aurora. On the early morning of April 17, 1897, the Dallas Morning News published an article with an almost unbelievable headline. An unidentified flying object had crashed on the property of a local judge, collided with a windmill, and exploded. The impact destroyed his flower garden, and according to the article, it also killed the being that had been piloting the craft. Locals quickly gathered at the scene. According to eyewitness accounts, the craft had shattered into fragments of metal, some of which were described as unlike any alloy known at the time. The object appeared to be made from shiny metallic plates, marked with strange symbols that were either etched or embossed. The body of the pilot was described as not human. It was small in stature, with a large head, and its face had been deformed by the explosion. A U.S. Army signal officer named T.J. Weems soon arrived at the site and offered a brief statement. "This being does not belong to this world." The residents of Aurora later buried the creature in the town cemetery, placing a small headstone to mark the grave, engraved with the image of what appeared to be a spacecraft. The remaining fragments of the craft were dumped into a nearby well, located just beside the site of the explosion. Decades later, people reported that the water from that well showed signs of metal contamination, and some who lived near it suffered from strange illnesses that doctors could not explain. Still, not everyone believed the story. In 1897, Aurora was a town in decline, having been bypassed by the main railroad line. Residents were grappling with disease outbreaks and repeated crop failures. Some historians have suggested that the original article was simply a ploy to draw attention and help revive the local economy. Like many towns during that era, the UFO story may have been a last-ditch attempt to put Aurora back on the map. And yet, the story endured, quietly passed down through generations. In an interview with Time magazine in 1980, a woman named Etta Pegues, then 86 years old and a former resident of Aurora, claimed that the whole thing had been a hoax, made up by a newspaper writer looking to entertain readers. And yet, she could not explain why the headstone really did exist, or why the well had been sealed off so abruptly. Today, most of the physical evidence is gone. The grave can no longer be precisely located. The headstone has vanished, and the metal fragments are nowhere to be found. But the questions remain. Did an extraterrestrial being really lie buried beneath a tree in the sun-baked fields of Texas? In the spring of 1941, just months before the United States would officially enter World War II, a strange event was said to have taken place in the quiet countryside of Missouri. The town of Cape Girardeau, nestled along the banks of the Mississippi River and known for its wide-open farmland and friendly residents, suddenly found itself at the center of a story that, to this day, has never been officially acknowledged. The story begins with an account passed down through 3 generations of a local family. Charlotte Mann, a woman living in Missouri, once shared that her grandfather, Reverend William Huffman, had confided in the family about a night he never forgot. According to Charlotte, on a quiet evening in early 1941, Reverend Huffman was awakened by a phone call from the local police department. A serious accident had just occurred in a field not far from town, and he was being asked to come and perform last rites for the deceased. But when he arrived at the scene, what he saw defied all expectations. Lying on the ground was a metallic disc-shaped object that appeared to have fallen from the sky and partially exploded. The body of the craft had been torn open, and inside were beings that did not resemble human beings. They were small in stature, with large heads and enormous black eyes that seemed to dominate their faces. 2 of them were already dead. A third was still alive, but barely, clinging to life in its final moments. Confronted with the scene before him, Reverend Huffman nonetheless stepped forward and quietly offered a prayer. He didn't know if the creature could understand his words, but he believed that any form of life, when facing death, deserved a final blessing spoken in peace. A few firefighters and emergency responders stood nearby, silently watching as he performed the rite. No one was allowed to take photographs, but rumors later emerged that a single picture had been captured. allegedly showing Reverend Huffman standing beside the 3 lifeless beings on the ground. That photo has never been found. Not long after, the military arrived to secure the site. They removed all debris and recovered the bodies. Those who had witnessed the event were ordered to remain absolutely silent. And so, the story never spread beyond those present at the time. Some today are skeptical, arguing that if such an incident had truly occurred, there would have to be evidence, especially in a small town where rumors tend to spread quickly. But others pose a different question. If the military had made it their mission to suppress the story from the very beginning, would anyone have ever had the chance to say anything at all? Still, if Charlotte Mann's account is true, then perhaps, on that quiet spring night in Missouri, it was the first time in American history that someone offered a final prayer to a being that did not come from this earth. Most UFO crash stories throughout history are linked to the era of world wars or the early years of the Cold War. But if we look further back, out across the open plains of Nebraska in the late 19th century, we find a very different story. The incident took place on June 6, 1884, in the sparse woodlands and open ground of Dundee County, Nebraska, near a small settlement called Max. A group of cowboys was herding cattle through the area when they suddenly witnessed a blazing streak of light tearing across the sky, followed by a loud explosion and a rising column of smoke beyond a nearby hill. When they approached the site, what they saw was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Lying in the center of a scorched patch of earth was a cylindrical metallic object, estimated to be between 50 and 60 feet long and about 10 to 12 feet in diameter. Some accounts described it as having large metal wheels, resembling the machinery of some strange device whose purpose no one could understand. The heat at the scene was described as extreme, so intense in fact that one man in the group suffered skin burns, singed hair, and reduced vision after standing too close to the object. The following day, a larger group returned, led by a local official named Rollins. They intended to mark the site and recover the object for further study. But due to a heavy rainstorm that day, they decided to postpone their efforts until the weather cleared. The next morning, when the group returned to the crash site, they found that everything had vanished. In place of the object was a set of pools containing a bluish-white liquid, which contemporary newspapers described as like lemon jelly mixed with cottage cheese. In the air lingered a faint sulfuric smell that had not yet dissipated. According to an article published in the Nebraska State Journal at the time, many believed the object had dissolved in the rain, something almost impossible if it had been an ordinary machine. Others speculated that it had been retrieved by someone or something else. And of course, there were those who argued the entire story had never happened at all. Years later, the newspaper's editor, James Calhoun, claimed he had made up the story to amuse readers. But that admission only led to further questions. Calhoun was known for his fictionalized tales, but the Dundee County event contained too many specific details, named witnesses, precise object descriptions, a clear location, and most notably, the strange liquid, something well beyond what the average person of the time could have imagined. A century later, in 2013, a group of amateur geology collectors discovered several greenish glass-like stones near the area around Max. These samples had an unusual structure, with white inclusions inside, closely matching the old descriptions of lemon jelly and cheese from the newspaper. Although no formal scientific analysis has been conducted, the find once again stirred memories of an event that had been entirely washed away by a single rainstorm. Like so many other accounts, the Dundee County case offers no definitive evidence. But if every one of these stories is pure fiction, then why do so many of them contain details that align so closely with phenomena we only began naming long after they were first described? From the fields of Nebraska to the red soil of New Mexico, from a small town in Italy to a cemetery in Texas, stories of unidentified objects falling to earth have appeared time and time again in accounts from the past. Each story may carry its own tone, but what's strange is how often certain details repeat themselves, regardless of location, era, or cultural divide. You may not believe every part of the stories you've just heard, but if even one detail gave you pause, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep following along on journeys like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next mystery.